are caused in a Hey, Alex here again. Time for another monthly Q&A. Now, this is actually going to be a 2-month Q&A because I didn't have time to get one out last month, and I haven't had time in the last few weeks to get videos out, so I don't have so many questions from this month. Usually I'll go through and pick questions that I think were particularly helpful to the community, and then I'll expound on them a little bit more, just in case people didn't read through the comments on like every single video thread. But since I didn't have time to prep, I'm just going to open up my community settings and go through the questions here live in front of your very eyes and pick out ones that I think, whatever, catch my eye. Now, if you haven't been watching for a while, this is a segment that I do every month. I've only been doing this for a few months. But it gives me the opportunity to hit on questions that I like to bring up to the community. It lets me talk about where we came from, what we're doing, and where we're headed, just so that everybody stays in the loop and you're not like, what's this guy doing? And it gives me a chance to thank people that have been either directly involved with projects or questions, as well as supporters and Patreon subscribers. As with most of these types of channels, it is community supported, so if you're interested in supporting the work that I do here, my links are always down below in the video description. Now, something changed over there at Patreon, and I couldn't pull up the stats for a particular window, so I'll try to get on that and thank the new subscribers from last month. When I do this next month, hopefully I'll have a handle on it by then. But anyway, let me talk a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes, where I've been, and then I'll get to some Q&A. So as many of you know, there have been a couple holidays here in America in the last month or so, and that always makes things a little bit awkward. But I've also reached the point with these videos where I need to speed the process up a little bit. And by process, I mean the processing. Now, of course, these videos take a lot of research and then a lot of experimentation and note-taking and that sort of thing. But the biggest portion of time comes down to like video editing, exporting, post-production, and transcoding and uploading. And I want to bump the resolution of these videos up a little bit, but that means more processing grunt, more bandwidth on the hard drives, and more storage space. And storage space is constantly a problem, because I've been an audio engineer for years, and those files end up being huge. Now, I know you video guys are probably out there like, oh, audio guy talking about big files. Well, here's the thing. An audio project might be 138 tracks of 24-bit 192K audio, along with all the samples and soft synths and associated files and that sort of stuff, so it does eat up room pretty quickly. But that being said, I had to strip my systems down and build them up from scratch. So I'm now running 2 straight RAIDs on my main machine. I put some faster drives in there, and I'm working on a redundant backup solution. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that yet. Right now, it's just, the general external like JBOD type deal. I'd like to do an auto backup and a deep freeze, but I just don't have the hard drive space right now, so we'll see how that goes. The reason I'm saying this is because for a period of like 3 weeks there, I wasn't backed up at all. And being the paranoid type that I was, I'm like, I'm just going to get this settled before I go record everything and lose like days of work. So anyway, that's boring. Unless you want to hear about RAID arrays, in which case I'll make some RAID array videos. RAID arrays redundant. Redundant is redundant. So anyway, here's what's coming up in the future. As I announced with the last video, maybe, or the one before that, we're starting to get into 32-bit land, which is very exciting, and we'll still be doing 8-bit videos, but there's a whole lot of ground to cover and a whole lot of unexplored area with the 32-bit stuff, so that's going to be exciting. I've actually recorded hours of video talking about this stuff. The problem I'm having is cutting it up into short, coherent pieces that I can then post online that'll make any kind of sense. And as you know, attention starts to wander after a particular period in time, and I'm still trying to find that best bang for the buck length in terms of technical videos. Thankfully, YouTube has stats on that, so I can see when people kind of like tune out and go watch something else. And I'm not interested in changing video formats just to get like more views or hits or more watch time or whatever. I just want to make sure that I don't bore somebody to death before I get the information that they need. Next thing is I want to weave more types of videos in and out, as in covering more subject matter, and I've mentioned this before, that I want to bring like more areas and disciplines into the channel. I also have a roadmap for the robotics type stuff, like 3D printing I consider a robotics type thing. I want to get into some like, you know, CNC or laser cutting type things in the future, depending on like what works out and how much room I have in here. Oh, and that's another reason I've been absent for a little while, is I have like 4 workstations in here, but only one was functional, and that was usually covered in whatever I was doing, so I ended up doing a lot of work just on my computer desk right here in front of my monitor, which is obviously not optimal. So I had to clear all that out so I could stage a couple different projects, get some lighting on those different workstations so I could actually film them, and then have a few things going on at the same time and get more content out quicker. If you've been watching this channel for a little while, you'll know that if I get on a roll, I'll put out like 4 videos in a week, 5 videos in a week, or I could just hit on 2 at a time. I also recently hit a goal on Patreon, which was a particular number of subscribers that I needed, and then I said, when that happens, I will get a website going on with more detailed information like transcripts for the videos I put up. So I've been trying to work on that. For right now, I'm just going to use my old WordPress blog to do that until I brush up on my HTML and CSS and get a real website up. So that's all coming as well. So enough of that. Let's get down to the questions. Now, like I said, I didn't grab these ahead of time, so I'm just going to literally read right here. So sorry that I'm staring off, and I'll bang a few of these out for you all. And I'll go back, as I am wont to do, and put a time index in the description of the video so you can see what the subject is, and then click on it. It'll take you right to that spot in the video, so you don't have to listen to me blather for like 5 minutes about something you're not interested in. Here we go. Okay, I had a lot of questions about I did a follow-up to the TMC2208 video because I had just sort of hit on that very quickly in the torque comparisons video, as in how to set up the TMC2208. And I wanted to go into a little bit more detail. So that video is like a step-by-step of how to get them set up in Marlin. And some people were still having problems with that. It's partially because, and I put this in the video, but I said you can use the regular 118 and you didn't have to use bugfix anymore in terms of like the Marlin version, and that's not true. You do have to use the bugfix. So make sure you download that branch. It's right there underneath the regular branch if you're on the Marlin firmware page. If you're on the Marlin GitHub, just go down to branch. There's a pull down menu. It says 1.1.8 bug fix. And somebody did report the other day that they were having problems getting it working. I don't know if one of the newest iterations of bug fix borked up the Trinamic support again, but I do know that the last version I had a chance to test on one of my machines was at the end of May, beginning of June, something like that. So you can roll back and grab one of the older versions of bugfix and try it if you're having a problem. But if they did have a problem with the Trinamic support, I'm sure by now they've fixed it. Let me see. The video where I tested the PLA embrittlement, somebody asked for some PETG testing. I'll probably do that in the future, like I answered in that gentleman in the thread. PETG is still fairly new-ish in terms of 3D printing filament. The formulations aren't consistent from brand to brand, and it's hard to make generalizations like you can with PLA, because what's true for one type of filament might be an isolated use case. So I'm just kind of letting that sit on the back burner. I don't want to jump the gun and do a bunch of testing in videos and print settings and things like that, only to have the industry shift away from that in a few months. So I'll get to it in the future. And mostly I print with PLA myself, unless I have a real good reason to print with some other stuff. I have several other types of filaments here, but I like the bio-based, biodegradable type filaments, and I try to steer clear of like pumping extra like petro-based filaments, plastics, and things like that into landfills. So, but I do use them from time to time, so I'll get to that. Let me see. Had another question from Mod Mike. He was asking about the Creality 1284P controller. That's a Melzi type controller. Now, the Melzi was an evolution of the Sanguina Lulu, which was based on the 1284P AVR chip. And some people are having some problems with those because they don't have as much room on them. Now, I think he was specifically asking about running Marlin 2, and Marlin 2 isn't really any bigger than Marlin 1. It's actually a little bit smaller, but it does have a lot more features you can use, so it can get a lot bigger. depending on what you stuff in there. Now, the problem for those Melzi boards is a lot of people are like, I really want to do like bed leveling and like a Z probe and things like that, but I keep running into like an out of memory error. And that's true. So if you go back to that Ramps Series 1 video and look underneath for where I had a back and forth about the Melzi boards, you can see what some of the issues are. A lot of very popular printers still use those, and they only have 128K of prog-mem, like program memory space, which is not a lot, especially compared to some of the newer 32-bit chips that have a whole lot on them. And some very popular printers run them. And I did make a short video explaining some of those options. I may have to go into more depth in the future, depending on how many people run into these issues when Marlin 2 goes live, but I'll just let that lie and see what happens. The Sekic, I think that's how you pronounce it, recommend that I start a GitHub, GitLab repo and commit a bunch of the changes that I make to stuff so that I can upload them to people. There's some projects coming up where I'm going to have to give links to some libraries that I've modded or written myself if you want to follow along with the project. So I'm going to have to do something about that. I'm a little freaked out about like GitHub being bought out by Microsoft. So I pulled my personal repos off GitHub for the time being, just until I figure out what's going on. I might go over to GitLab. We'll see how everything pans out, but that's still a little bit in the future, so I'm not worried about it immediately, but I will be doing that. AMSR asks ASMR? Says, very informative. Thank you for this, by the way. If you ever have a brittle spool of PLA, what will you do to make it printable again? Yeah, there are a couple methods that are kicking around. I'm going to be testing them into the future, but for right now, I don't have time to do that. I do have a big thing of PLA right here that I'm drying out purposely just for that. So I'm just letting it sit out in a horrible place right by the window so it could be nice and brittle by the time I get around to doing that project. Mickey was asking about installing or building Marlin 2 on Arduino IDE. Okay. So if you've tried to install Marlin 2, you know that developers have kind of shifted over to Platform IO, which is necessary because we're not just working with Arduino stuff anymore. We're working with an entire huge family of processors. So if you're just using Arduino stuff or your AVR stuff, some of the NXP chips that Arduino has also used on like the Dua and things like that, you can still compile it in the Arduino IDE, but the Windows version is borked. So you have to use the IDE 1.9 version beta, and I tried that and it works fine. It also works fine in Mac OS, the version right now, like 1.8.5 or whatever it is, and it works fine in Linux. I tested them both. It's just the Windows one that's screwed up. Ming Shenjiang asks, being attracted by the quietness of TMC driver and so blah, 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 blah. He basically wanted to know about, can you use a Raspberry Pi as a 32-bit 3D printer controller? Not really. That's more a general purpose compute platform than a microcontroller. There have been people that have tinkered around with putting like real-time operating systems in there and like isolating threads, but when push comes to shove, you need direct access to the interrupts and the timers, so you have to either add like an external DMA board and the code that goes along with it, or you have to use the Raspberry Pi for the compute parts of it and then spit that out to an actual microcontroller that does what a microcontroller does, as in the case of like Clipper firmware and things like that. And consequently, Raspberry Pis aren't that cheap. Like the Zeros are pretty cheap, but you can get 32-bit breakout boards a lot cheaper than that. And that's another subject I will be touching on very soon, is building a 32-bit platform from just a breakout board instead of an entire printer board. So stay tuned for that. I could even put a clickbaity title on it, like $2 32-bit printer board, which is a lie, but all those clickbait titles are a lie. Let me see. John said something about awesome data. Thank you. I switched from the TMC 22 whatever's to the SD2224s because of the slight algorithm change. Bye skip steps. Yeah. So Panikit makes their own versions of like the Trinamic driver boards, and some of them are a little bit beefier than the Trinamic stuff. So if you're having problems with them heating up and, you know, missing steps or something like that, you might want to check out the, I forget what they're called, like the Shorefoot series of drivers with the big fan heat sinks on them. And I think they have them set up with different defaults as well. That's Panikit. Oh, Bart. Yes, Bart. He asked a question about the surface mount ramps boards like the MKS 1.5s, 1.6s, and whatever other ones are floating around out there. The diodes, the D1 and D2, the positions on the board are kind of switched. Now, this is important. The positions are moved, but the diodes themselves still do what they still follow the original ramp schematic. So D1 is still D1, D2 is still D2. Their place is just switched on the board. So if you're doing like a 24-bit conversion, 32-bit conversion, whatever, or volt conversion, you still want to pull D1, and D2 is still the polarity protection. So if you do it wrong, you will fry your Mega, and you don't want to do that. And Hobby Rob just asked about DRV8825 drivers and the smoother diodes. Apparently he read on a forum somewhere that's, I think, is in Dutch or French, so I can't read it. He read that there was like a new iteration of the DRV8825s that fixed some of the problem they have with the moire pattern. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go ahead and watch the TL Smoothers at 24 volts video that I put up. I haven't heard anything about different DRV8825s. The old ones actually work fine depending on the operating conditions. So those drivers are so old that I haven't really put out a detailed video about them, but here's what the deal is. They have some regulation and skipped microstep problems that results in what's called a moire pattern around particularly curved surfaces on prints with certain motors at certain voltages. Particularly, the lower the inductance of the motor and the higher the voltage, the more likely you are to get that pattern. And you can fix that with series diodes to the motor voltage, as you can see in the video, but you may or may not need it depending on your setup. So test it first, buy diodes later. And those boards are available really cheap now. They used to be like 10 or 15 bucks. Now they're like, you know, $3-5, something like that. And you can make your own. I think I showed that in the video, where I just strung a bunch of diodes together. Conditions that cause that are, like I said, low inductance on the motor and high voltage. So if you're running at like 12 volts, which is like low voltage, but low inductance, you might be okay. If you're running like high inductance and high voltage, you might be okay. But if you're running low inductance and high voltage, you might get the patterns. And then the easiest way to fix it is just to put the diode smoothers on. You can also adjust the decay settings, the blanking time, because that's part of what the problem is. These chips, most of them are in mixed decay mode, and it's mixed depending on the algorithm that the company, or the sensors or whatever, that the company build into the chips and what they're set at as a default by the people who designed the step stick boards. So apparently mixed decay mode is what doesn't work particularly well with the frequencies that PWM buy the inductance and the voltage. So you can put them in fast decay mode, but that's only if you're using low inductance motors and high voltage. But I think it's easier to just slap the diodes on there and it works fine. Alright, I will stop there. I think that's quite enough for now. So thanks for watching this far. Check out the support links below. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. And as I get time, I'll try to get to as many as I can. And I will be getting more videos out very soon. We'll be talking about some general robotics. We'll be talking about various kinematic platforms, probably some extruder stuff. I'm going to be doing a very geeky and math-heavy series on extruders. Maybe a printer design from scratch series, if I could find the time to do the CAD work to clean up the files. There's also some music and music technology stuff coming up. The continuation of the Cigar Box Ukulele series. And I've been kicking around the idea of doing some other things like how to record these YouTube videos on a budget and easy editing techniques for the audio and video, but we'll see. That's like icing on the cake type things, and I'll have to put that off until I get the core stuff finished, which hopefully will go a lot quicker now that I'm a bit more organized. And recording on those projects will resume as soon as I get the rest of my parts in the mail to make my backup, because I don't want to record not backed up. So thanks for watching. Until the next video, get out there and make something awesome.